Hello, I'm Manawoltos, and today I want to talk about some things that have been happening politically in the United States and also to some extent the rest of the world recently. So, as probably most people know, Donald Trump recently won the election for becoming president of the United States of America, and or at least he won the main election. Of course, the electors don't really get together until some time later to vote, and then he doesn't get into office until January. But he has won. So, for those of you who aren't aware, let me get my position during this election out there. Um, I throughout this election have at the start of the election I was a bit excited because there were some pretty good candidates, some candidates that I thought were very electable. And then once the primaries were done with, I looked at what was left, and I didn't really find anyone that I found electable. As in, Hillary Clinton was a no for me. I wasn't going to vote for Hillary Clinton. Um, that was probably the most definite thing, simply because policy-wise, she is so far off from me that let's just say I'm not into that kind of life, you know? Hillary Clinton is a lot more socialist than I am. Not saying that I am a socialist because I'm not, and that's probably the reason. Of course, I didn't like Bernie Sanders either for the same reason. Now, Hillary Clinton, of course, also has been involved in a lot of controversy over the years, including attacking the women who were whistleblowing on, well, not really whistleblowing. They were more talking about what they did with Bill Clinton out in the public, and Hillary Clinton was trying to protect Bill Clinton's reputation in a manner that I think is not honorable, and that is by attacking these women that came out. And she was vicious. But anyway, that's in the past now, and Hillary Clinton has lost the election. Anyway, Donald Trump, on the other hand, I personally have to say that although he was certainly bold on a few issues, and I like that, I also had some serious problems with Donald Trump. For one, his character, or at least how he presented himself during the election, I found was, to me, a bit despicable. And just the way he treated his fellow candidates in his own party. He would go around and just be all around dishonorable and disrespectful, and he would lie about people, and I didn't like that, of course. Policy-wise, he's obviously a progressivist, which is another thing that I'm not. I'm more for small government. That's my position. So progressivism really isn't my kind of thing. Which is interesting because Hillary Clinton is also a progressivist. So I guess sort of two sides of the same coin, I suppose. But of course, Donald Trump had a bit more, some policies that were a bit more in line with the Republican Party, and it's just one of those things where Donald Trump, the more he opens his mouth, the less I appreciated him throughout the election. And there are some things that he said that just didn't make sense at all. For example, making Mexico pay for the wall. Like that's ever going to happen. Of course, I don't think that's even possible, or at least feasible. realistic, that is, entirely unrealistic. And and anyway, that's enough on Trump. I don't want to spend the entirety of this time just ranting about Donald Trump. And then you go to the next one, Gary Johnson. Originally, I was thinking, well, maybe Gary Johnson's good. I'm a small government guy. Libertarian might be a good way to vote. And there are a few issues that I really disagreed with on Gary Johnson. Some issues that I didn't like, and also I think his foreign policy ideas are a bit isolationist, and as a consequence, he hasn't studied foreign policy at all, by the looks of it. He didn't even know what Aleppo was. And I'm not just saying that he didn't know the context of it, because I can understand people not knowing the context of something. For example, someone says, oh, Aleppo. I might ask, what are you talking about? The politics, the economy of Aleppo, the demographics of Aleppo? There's many different things related to Aleppo. The history of Aleppo, for example. I know some of that, and that's how I am aware of Aleppo. But anyway, he was entirely confused on that issue, and then later on, he was entirely confused on who led other countries in the world, and just couldn't find anyone to admire. Now, I think it's okay if you don't find any foreign leader that's admirable. I think that's completely fine. Because I'll be honest, from the top of my head, I don't really find anyone, I can't really think of anyone from the top of my head that I heavily admire who's a leader of any country at the moment. Of course, Putin has this sort of strength about him, this strength of character and stuff like that. But I don't really admire him policy-wise. So I wouldn't say that I admire him. I say that maybe I have a respect for him. Now, of course, I myself am a very respectful person. You could be a serial killer and I'll still be polite to you, simply because of my moral code, where I'm polite to people regardless of who they are. But anyway, that's probably why I had such a big dissonance with Donald Trump, because I'm very into this courtesy thing, and he isn't. But anyway, back on track. So Gary Johnson was just too ignorant on foreign policy, and I'm thinking, you have to know foreign policy. You can't lead a country without knowing foreign policy. That's just not okay. Jill Stein. A lot of people were saying, oh yeah, Jill Stein, and I'm looking at her. The Green Party. That's immediately a turnoff for me. Because the Green Party is a party that is, for example, Democratic Party, Republican Party, the names of those parties don't really divulge what their big issue is. And so when judging people from those parties, and simply because the parties are so big, you have to judge each person individually in these parties, because there's a great variance on what various Democrats believe is good policy-wise and what various Republicans believe is good policy-wise. I mean, you've got progressivists in both the Democrats and the Republicans. And then you've also got the libertarians, in which it's a lot easier to know what they stand for, but you still have to be very discerning on some things. For example, I wouldn't mind voting for a libertarian, simply because libertarianism is something that I find sits well with me. Of course, there are some parts of the issues that I would probably disagree with most libertarians, so I'm not going to blindly vote for any party. For example, in the primary, I went to vote for vote in the Republican primary, because simply I looked at all the different candidates and their policies were more in line with the things that I thought were good policies. Okay. And so the Green Party, the reason I don't like the Green Party is because it's a single issue party. It's a party based on the issue of environmentalism. But other than that, they're oftentimes very socialist, which I don't like, and also I'm not that big an environmentalist myself. I mean, I think it's good to ensure that you've got clean air, clean water, and stuff like that. But okay, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag simply because I don't want to beat around the bush too much. So let's get straight to the point. Global warming is 100% a hoax. And I've spent years looking at this, and you take a look at the temperatures, and you see that in the early 2000s, the temperatures peaked, and then they started going down. The Arctic ice cap was at a low, and now it's increasing. And then you look at the impact that people say aerosols had in reducing global warming, and then you find out later that the impact wasn't actually as great as they thought it was, which meant that conversely, or I don't think conversely might be the correct way to say this, it meant that the greenhouse gases emitted by humans also weren't as great as they thought they were, because simply because then you have to balance it out. And then you also look at the fact that carbon dioxide isn't bad for the environment at all. In fact, it's actually very good for the environment, because it really allows plants to bloom more. In fact, the more carbon dioxide you have in the atmosphere, the more you have a phenomenon that some people call global greening, as in plants get bigger, plants grow better. And I think trying to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is counterproductive, economically and agriculturally speaking, as well as environmentally, because then that's going to make it more difficult for plants to survive. And yet these people still would classify carbon dioxide as a pollutant, even though it is necessary in the oxygen cycle, in the cycle of plant growth, which releases oxygen into the atmosphere. And then oxygen is very important for humans as well as animals to survive. Practically everything needs oxygen except for anaerobic bacteria, which still need oxygen, just not in the same way that humans, animals, and plants require oxygen. So anyway, you can look at and let's actually get to the 98% thing. I don't want to make this a video about environmentalism, but I opened a can of worms, so I might as well empty it. 98% of scientists agree that there is climate change. Now, notice the wording of it, climate change. It's not global warming, it's climate change, and it's climate change and not necessarily caused by humans. So it's actually a very vague question that they use to justify a very specific thing. So it's a classic bait and switch, where they ask all these scientists, is there such a thing as climate change? And then they all say yes. And then they use that to justify saying that humans have a massive impact on the climate that is causing global temperatures to increase by maybe 2 or 3 degrees in 100 years, which isn't much. And if you compare that to the amount of climate change there has been in recorded history, as in you've got the medieval warm period and then the Little Ice Age and stuff like that, it's not actually very big, because that's definitely within the standard amount of regular climate change during the pre-industrial period of human civilization. So this 98% thing is by far a very misconstrued statistic that the environmentalists use. But anyway, back onto a different subject. So I wasn't voting for Clinton, Trump, Johnson, Jill Stein, none of these people. So I ended up and I wasn't going to vote for the communists. No way, Jose. I'm not voting for the communists. Nor was I going to vote for any prohibition party. Let's be honest, that is not good. I mean, single issue parties you always have to be careful with, because, of course, you know their stance on that one issue, but what about all the other issues? So I ended up having to pick between McMullen and Castle. Castle was from the Constitution Party. McMullen was an independent candidate who was actually polling really well in Utah, but he wasn't on my ballot, so I picked Darrell Castle because he's from Constitution Party. And you know what? I respect the United States Constitution. It's a document that you read it and you see that it's specifically designed to prevent tyranny, and also to provide people with a lot of freedom. And of course, the big issue in the Constitution Party and also the Tea Party, which let's actually talk about the Tea Party. Who is the Tea Party? The Tea Party is attacked a lot in the media, but so many people in other countries might get a very distorted image of what the Tea Party is. The Tea Party, the T in the Tea Party means taxed enough already, and what their principal, what their driving force is to enforce the United States Constitution and to have a limited government under the principles that low taxes will allow businessmen to invest more into the economy, which is a lot more efficient than the government investing in economy. I think that's definitely proven itself over the course of history, that people trying to make money are a lot better at making money than people who aren't trying to make money. So it's a free market economic thing, which I'm in favor of. I even went to a Tea Party meeting once, and it's not about violent revolution. It's not about sticking it to the man. It's about following the U.S. Constitution. But anyway, that's enough on the Tea Party. So back to the election. Donald Trump won, and I, being someone who voted for Darrell Castle, wasn't really upset at all, because I knew that Darrell Castle wasn't going to win. I voted for him because I vote my conscience, and I think that if I vote for Donald Trump, then I would be in part responsible for any actions that Donald Trump takes. And since Donald Trump's policies don't really line up with mine, and his character I found didn't resonate well with me, I decided that no, I wasn't going to be responsible for any of that. So I'm voting Darrell Castle, somebody who I can respect as a politician. So anyway, Donald Trump wins, and I had by far by far resigned myself at this point from taking any emotional involvement, some heavy emotional involvement in who actually won, because I voted for someone who I knew was not going to win, just looking at the polls and party membership, historical voting breakdowns. It just wasn't in the cards, and I knew that from the start, and I voted that way anyway. But anyway, Donald Trump wins. The next day, or even that same night, people start protesting. And the way these people protest is organized. Of course it's organized. There's no way that all these different people already have their signs and all that stuff ready, and so that some guy gives the word, they all come out and they protest. There's always somebody organizing these big protests, I've found from experience. Just like the protests against George Zimmerman during the Trayvon Martin case were actually organized by Eric Holder and the Department of Justice, where they were bussing people in to protest. And I don't think it's good for the central government to take that heavily an involvement in a local case, especially backing one side. And if you're going to back any side, you should always back the defendant because of presumption of innocence. But no, that's not the U.S. Department of Justice in that year. No way. They weren't doing that. Anyway, so back on track. These people were protesting, and more recently they started breaking windows, just like... what is it with these people and breaking windows and robbing stores? It happened in Ferguson, Missouri, and I hope that the police prosecutes these people to the full extent of the law, because they aren't making a point by breaking windows. If you go out and you have a peaceful protest, that's fine. But if you go out and you start looting and rioting and breaking windows and stealing things and being disrespectful to the police, you don't look like somebody who has a valid point. You look like a hooligan. And that is the problem with these kinds of protests. These people go out there and they make absolute fools of themselves, when what they should be doing is being very honest and peaceful and non-violent, because violence should only be used as a last resort, really. That's my philosophy on it. If you disagree, my goodness, don't attack me, because I'm actually pretty tough in a fight. So anyway, they are walking down the street and they're breaking all these windows, and that's money that's going right down the drain. These shop owners, that's their livelihood that these people are destroying. And that's a bad thing. But anyway, at some university or college or something, I don't even know, they had the students gather up and in something called a primal scream, where they're all just huddled together and they're screaming. And I'm thinking, primal scream? What is a primal scream? Actually, I'm looking up the word primal right now, and Google is giving me primal, essential, fundamental. Synonyms: basic, fundamental, essential, elemental, vital, central, instinctive, inherent, relating to an early stage in evolutionary development. No surprise there. Primeval, and in a psychological context of relating to or denoting the needs, fears, or behaviors that are postulated, especially in Freudian theory, to form the origins of emotional life. In other words, they're saying that this is something that is natural. But let me ask you, is it natural to go out and scream? Actually, not just to go out and scream. To gather together for the specific purpose of screaming. Is that natural? Is that a natural reaction? Is that an adult reaction? I mean, it's like a child throwing a temper tantrum. That's not something that I would expect from a mentally stable adult, unless somebody is literally trying to kill you or trying to rape you. You don't just go and you scream about things. You don't scream if your favorite sports team lost. Well, maybe some people do, but you need to really seriously take a chill pill on that. If you do, take a chill pill. It's not the end of the world. You know, Donald Trump winning the U.S. election isn't the end of the world. If Hillary Clinton had won, it also wouldn't be the end of the world. And I also think that if Hillary Clinton had won, there wouldn't be people rioting and screaming. Well, maybe some of the Trump supporters are that way. Maybe some of them, but definitely not to the extent that we are seeing it now. But anyway, what does this mean for politics in the United States? Well, Donald Trump is in, and immediately he's talking about repealing all the different executive orders that Barack Obama has put in place. Now, executive orders are things where the president tells the government to do something without asking Congress. And of course, Congress can throw that down, but it's essentially a way for the president to get things done without having to go through the usual channels. And I think the reason it exists is for maybe emergencies, such as the country is being attacked and you don't have time to ask Congress to send the army, so you have to send the army. But it has been seriously abused over the last 100 years, where executive orders have been used for stuff such as economics, which I really think it shouldn't be used for. But anyway, Donald Trump is going to go in, or at least he says he's going to go in, and he's going to repeal all these executive orders that Barack Obama put in. Now, the reason Barack Obama put in all these executive orders is because at some point during his presidency, he lost a majority in Congress, and he wasn't able to put all these things through. So he instead decided, screw Congress, I'm going to make my own laws. And he made all these laws. Now, because he decided to do it this way, it's actually really easy for anybody who becomes president to repeal these things. Since they weren't approved by Congress in the first place, they don't have to deal with Congress when repealing all these executive orders. Now, as for how I feel about Trump being president, I personally I think I made the right choice in the vote that I put, but I'm still willing to give Donald Trump a chance. Give Trump a chance, guys. All you guys that are protesting out there, give him a chance. He might not be as bad as you think he is. And hopefully things get better. I mean, I'd like to be wrong about Donald Trump. I'd love to be wrong about Donald Trump. Whenever I say something that's negative about someone, I always hope that I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, then that makes the world just that much better. Not that I'm wrong, but that things aren't as bad as they seem. So that's a good thing then. Wow, this video has gone on for what, 30 minutes now? My goodness, I'm really rambling on this one, eh? Hey, that good old ramble. Anyway, the Republican Party is a bit messed up because of the election. Because you've got Donald Trump, who is definitely not what Republicans would consider conservatives. Now, a conservative in the American parlance usually refers to someone who goes after the same policies as Ronald Reagan, which are, in fact, a bit more liberal in the essence of actual classical liberalism than the actual people in the United States that call themselves liberal, who are usually Democrats. So it's a bit weird and messed up compared to the European policy dynamics. The U.S. is a bit weird in the sense that being conservative means that you want the government to have less power than it already does. You want to go back to a smaller government, unlike in Europe, where conservative is usually the opposite of that. Well, it depends which country you're in, I guess. It really does depend on which country you're in, because the left-right dichotomy is different in every country. In the United States, what the left is and what the right is very different from what the left is and the right is in France, for example. It's entirely different. For example, in the United States, the average rank-and-file right-wing person is definitely not a Nazi or anything like that. There are a lot more small government type people who are in favor of free market economics and are in favor of individual rights. But anyway, let's get off of that. So the Republican Party is really broken after this election because Donald Trump was a populist, and he said some conflicting things during the election, and he said he was up against the establishment, although the establishment backed him at certain points and then stopped backing him and then backed him again, stopped backing him, backed him again. Now he's got some establishment people that he's going to put in his government. And also the traditional conservatives were really left out by Donald Trump because of Donald Trump's policies being a bit more on what one might expect from actually the Democrats compared to the Republicans, because Donald Trump had been a Democrat for many years, and it's only not too long ago that he became a Republican. So yeah, that's that. And so the Republican Party is in a really murky situation right now, because some people were the never-Trumpers, the conservative never-Trumpers, who are a lot less hysterical than the progressive never-Trumpers, and they are all about getting those constitutional things in, and then you've got the establishment, which is a bit more about keeping the Republican Party in power, and is a lot more flexible in what kind of policies they're willing to back. And then you've got populists who change all the time, because people's opinions on various things are always changing, which I don't think is the best way to do politics. I think it's always good to have a moral code or a system of values to fall back on, so that you don't have to worry about the whims of the people and whether or not the people are good at certain policies or bad at other policies, or how educated the people are, because sometimes people are really educated and sometimes they aren't really educated, and there's many other factors that go into it, because sometimes really educated people can make really dumb decisions. But by the same logic, of course, really uneducated people can also make really dumb decisions. You might say, oh, you think they can make good decisions? Yes, really uneducated people can make really good decisions as well, just like really good educated people can make good decisions. So what I'm trying to say is that the majority opinion isn't always the best opinion, because it can be very skewed, and a lot of times you have you've got a few people that understand the issues, and then other people that trust those people who are willing to follow them. And if there's a misunderstanding in the upper rank of this, then it will translate down to the people in the bottom rank of that. So always analyze the issues for yourself, so that you at least know where you stand and where everyone else stands. So anyway, internationally speaking, now let's go to a completely different subject. Internationally speaking, you have Russia. They're at war in the Middle East, and there's also a war going on in Ukraine, with especially in the eastern Ukraine, where there's the breakaway republics. And now you hear things about Russia using what I think was 11 million people in some readiness exercise. And the only reason you'd use that big an amount of people for such an exercise would be if you're expecting weapons of mass destruction. So Russia is getting ready for weapons of mass destruction, and NATO has begun to move against Russia, not actually in a war, but to prepare for a potential conflict with Russia. So we've moved a lot of troops and resources. So what I'm thinking is this war in the Middle East and in the Ukraine might spread at some point during maybe the next 20 years. And then there will be another big war. Now, the extent of this war, I'm not entirely certain on that, but it's going to be a big one. And, well, guess see you on the other side then. But anyway, I think that's all I've really got to say. Thank you all for watching, and I will be there next time. And I will toss over and out. Wait. Before I'm out, do comment on anything in the video, anything at all. I like getting comments, because if I don't get comments, then I don't know how my video went down with you all. Now, of course, I don't expect most people to get to this point in this video, because there's nothing going on the screen probably. So yeah, it's like listening to the radio, except the host is a really low quality host who doesn't know how to talk hours on end without having a subject in front of him. I mean, I've still got this page open that has the word primal open on Google. But anyway, so thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time. Underwoltos over and out. Let's click the stop button. There we go.